Good evening, Majdal. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to talk about anti-money laundering and what does it mean. But first of all, let me introduce you, Majdal. Apart from being my friend and an expert in all legal stuff, she's Director of Operations and Legal at Real Trust Conveyancing and Escrow Services. And Majdal is also our instructor in Thinkprop.
Hello, good morning, everyone.
So today we decided to have a casual conversation. Honestly, I have a lot of questions about laundering, anti-money laundering. There's a lot of buzz about it. So I wanted to get some clarification. And apart from that, we also have a course coming up. So I think it's very good if we give some light to it, like, kind of explain what exactly is going on. Tell me please first, how did you come up with the idea that that's important? Like why do we need to make a course? Why anti-money laundering is important?
So anti-money laundering is important, especially for the real estate sector, because traditionally, historically anyway, the real estate sector has been a favorite of money launderers since the concept of money laundering came about. So especially here in the UAE, so as most of us know, the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, did have UAE previously on their gray list, meaning that there was an increased amount of monitoring on the UAE for the past couple of years. And in February of this year, UAE was taken off of the FATF's gray list. So it's super important specifically for the real estate sector in the UAE to remain off of the gray list in the future. So this topic is really timely, and we need to discuss what the obligations are of the real estate brokers when it comes to AML.
What does it mean if a country is on a gray list for the citizens, for the banking system? What does it mean?
So basically there's increased monitoring, and a lot of the banks, especially foreign banks, foreign investors, foreign companies, are very hesitant about entering a market when the country is on a gray list.
So if we want more clients, we need to be clear in this aspect.
Exactly.
Okay, all right. What kind of anti-money laundering processes you can say, like what are they really doing when it comes to real estate?
Yeah, so it's important to understand. So the UAE has had AML regulations since 2018. Mm-hmm. And real estate brokers have always been part of those regulations since 2018. However, specifically in 2022, the Ministry of Economy, which is the supervisory authority for real estate brokers and the real estate sector, issued a circular stating that there were specific obligations for real estate brokers doing sales and purchases of real estate. So what are those obligations? If there's a transaction where cash is being used in the amount of 55,000 dirhams or more, now whether it's a one-time payment of 55,000 plus, or it's broken down, let's say 10,000 here, 10,000 there, whatever it might be, the broker is obligated to report this to the Financial Intelligence Unit. Also, if cryptocurrency or any kind of virtual assets, NFTs, whatever it might be, are being used for the transaction, whether for part of the payment or the whole amount, that also has to be reported to the FIU. And if crypto is converted into cash, again, for whole or part of the amount of the purchase price, that is the third time and the third situation that the brokers are obligated to report this to the Financial Intelligence Unit.
So from the broker side, all he needs to do is just to report, like whenever they have a client who has this kind of questions, can I pay cash, can I pay in crypto, and all this kind of stuff, they have to report this. Yeah.
Yes, well, actually, so it has to be done through, there should be a compliance officer or
Mm-hmm.
a money laundering reporting officer, whatever they call the position in the company.
Mm-hmm.
And that person has to file the reports with the FIU through the Go AML. There's a Go AML portal that the
Mm-hmm.
brokerages must register for. So that person would be responsible for doing that. Now, it is the broker's duty to report that to the compliance officer. So how
Mm-hmm.
can the broker protect themselves in case the compliance officer ignores his or her request to
Mm-hmm.
report it, or perhaps just forgets about it, whatever it might be? How do they protect themselves from getting penalized? They have
Okay.
to show proof, so that if the Financial Intelligence Unit or the Ministry of Economy comes to them and says, hey, you didn't do your obligation, that you have some kind of proof that here are the chats with the compliance officer, here are the emails with them, here's the system that we use, a screenshot of it. Whatever it is that you can show, the more proof to protect yourself, the better, but make sure that you have proof.
I also heard in the market, like a broker, like a client comes with cash, and the broker acts as a investigator, and then they will ask for proof of funds, and let's say the person will provide them something, and then they'll go ahead with the deal. Like that's not how it should be done, right? Like you
No,
still
and
report it.
you still have to report it to the FIU. That is absolutely your obligation. And also, it really shouldn't be you as the broker doing any of this. There's a compliance officer for a reason, and they're supposed to be
Mhm.
the ones doing these things and making the final call whether or not to go forward with a transaction.
Because
So something important. Oh, sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
So something else important to note for the broker. So even if you file this real estate activity report, which is the one we just discussed in those three
Mm-hmm.
situations, you still are obligated to also report any suspicious activities or transactions. So just because you report that, oh, they've used cash in an amount more than 55,000 dirhams, doesn't mean that if there's something else suspicious about the transaction or their activities, that you now don't also have to report that as well. So there
Like
is a lot of
what?
reporting.
Like what kind of suspicious activities apart from trying to pay in Bitcoin?
Yeah, so also you're looking for things. So there are these indicators or red flags or typologies, as they're called in money laundering. So obviously cash is a big one, and we've all heard
Mm-hmm.
of people coming with the suitcases full of cash to the transfers. Also using, so a lot of these either criminals, or we call them PEPs, the politically exposed persons, meaning politicians, heads of state, heads of international organizations, those people who might be bribed, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And also, so any of these types of people, they usually like to use quote unquote clean people, clean third parties who
Okay.
don't have anything attached to their name, basically, and do the transactions using their names or their bank accounts, for example. So that's one thing. Another thing is a shell company. So using a shell company. What is a shell company? It's a company that exists only on paper. It doesn't actually operate. So you might try to Google it and you don't find any history about it, doing any business, any type of thing like that. Or they might
Mm-hmm.
have a very complicated corporate structure that doesn't really make sense because they're trying to hide who the
Mm-hmm.
person is behind it, where the funds are coming from, etc. So
Yeah.
those are a couple of examples of things to look out for. If a client is completely uninterested in the details of a property, like you're trying to show them, oh, look at this gorgeous sea view, and they're saying, yeah, I don't care, just, or you're saying, look, this is a really bad investment. It's horrible. It doesn't make sense. And they're
Mm-hmm.
saying, doesn't matter, just do the deal. Or, if they really it just doesn't make sense what they're doing, that is also a red flag to look out for.
Okay. So there have been any AML regulations in UAE that real estate professionals should be aware of? Like, what are the penalties? Maybe like what the laws behind AML for the real estate brokers, like what they need to know. Because
Yeah,
to be
so
honest, like if you don't really read the circulars, and the brokers 90% they don't, they just know about it, and they just go by flow. And also, when you are a broker and you work on commission, you are trying to close anything possible, and you try to close your eyes, on some things just to get your deal done. So what are the consequences and what are the laws that are in place, for the real estate brokers?
well, we discussed the big one, the real estate activity report. So
Yeah.
what are the consequences of violating the AML regulations? So it could be a penalty of anywhere between 500,000 dirhams to 5 million dirhams for an individual, and then also imprisonment of up to 10 years. So it could be and/or imprisonment. So could be both.
Oh.
And then for companies, we're talking about up to 50 million dirhams. And then also they could close down the company or suspend the license. So could be termination of business altogether. And then also if you fail to report suspicious activities or transactions, then you're also talking about either jail time and or financial penalties. Yes. And guess what? There's even an additional thing that you need to know about. If you tip off your client that, hey, we've reported this transaction or we reported this activity, whatever it might be, then you also can have jail time and or financial penalties as well.
Well,
So
that's
there
a
are a
good
lot of
point.
things to know. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Whoa. Real estate job is not so much fun anymore. No, actually, it's not so hard, right? Can you please just briefly tell me, like, what are the biggest challenges that real estate companies face in complying with AML regulations in UAE? Like, what is the problem really? Because, I know that there is a lot of awareness that the governments are trying to push. I've heard about fines. I've heard that they started already, kind of finding, is it? Like
Yes,
they're
it's
doing
been,
something about it. Yeah. So
yes,
what are the
yes.
biggest challenges? Why the companies are not doing it? And what do you think? How can we help them maybe?
Yeah, so some of the challenges, so obviously UAE is 90% expat. And so
Mm-hmm.
we have a lot of foreign investors and even those who don't live in the UAE. And those people in particular probably don't have bank accounts inside the UAE, right? So they're heavily relying on wiring cash, using cash, et cetera, to do these deals. And then
Yeah.
we also have a lot of people fleeing, as we've seen in recent years, from various conflicts around the world, right? So
Yeah.
when they are coming here, they're coming with cash. They're often put on sanctions lists. So that's another thing. You've got to do your customer due diligence, make sure that they're not on any sanctions lists. And we have UAE that's actually, they're trying to encourage the use of cryptocurrency. In fact, I just read a couple of days ago in Arabian Business, they had an article how UAE is the fastest growing market for crypto use.
Yeah. I
And
saw
with
they
that,
legalized Binance. It's finally like an official company in
yes,
UAE.
they Binance just got their license
Yeah.
recently, a week or two ago. So with that use of cryptocurrency, of course, now there's this AML risk with it as well,
Yeah.
right? And as we see, we have reporting obligations with the use of cryptocurrency. So that's another thing. Now, also having a compliance officer for especially these smaller companies, it's a cost, right? And this market isn't very big and there aren't that many trained compliance officers here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing. And the cost of doing these sanction screenings, a lot of these companies are made for these multinationals with big budgets and big volumes
Mm-hmm.
of sanction screenings that they need to do. And so it doesn't really fit with these smaller businesses inside in their budgets. So there are a lot of different kind of challenges that the UAE real estate market is seeing.
So technically, the big sharks, they're safe because they have money to pay a compliance officer, and they can use those softwares that are screening people. And those small businesses, they have to work on their own risk in a way.
Yeah,
Or
I
like
mean,
just
and
scenario, just report everybody just in case, or how?
well, I mean, you can also overdo it and then never have any business as well, right? But there are ways. So you do have to take a risk-based approach when you are
Mm-hmm.
thinking about your anti-money laundering compliance. And this is where it would help if you cannot afford to bring in a trained compliance officer, then
Mm-hmm.
you can go to keep a part of your budget to go to a compliance consultant. There are many compliance consultancies that
Mm-hmm.
will help you to come up with a risk-based approach. So the risk-based approach is going to be based on your risk appetite as management of the brokerage. And also, of
Mm-hmm.
course, the AML regulations and processes and the guidance provided by the Ministry of Economy and the FATF, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. So they can pay a retainer to some compliance companies who will help them on regular basis, pretty much, yeah?
Yeah, definitely,
Okay,
yes.
okay. That sounds like a solution. Um, sounds better than
Yeah.
just being in a blind risk. Okay, so what are some practical measures that real estate brokerages and brokers can take to ensure that they are compliant to AML regulations? Like, let's say we're talking now to the management of the companies, like, what do we need to do to make sure that, my team, and I know how now brokerages are, like, they have hundreds of people, like, how do they control them? How do they make sure that everybody are ethical and everybody are working, in the right way?
So they definitely, so you should have, again, I know not everybody can afford a trained compliance officer, but you should choose somebody, even if it's somebody within the team. Now, preferably it's not somebody that's client facing, because obviously there's a conflict of interest with that, right?
Yeah.
They're pushing to get their commission and deals done. And so, they might overlook some things that they shouldn't be overlooking. It's got to be somebody who is neutral, that has their own, they are able to make their own decisions as to whether or not to go forward with a transaction or whether or not to report it. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's something that I highly encourage, is just, even if you can't afford somebody with experience, just pick somebody that can do this and that can do the job well, and they will, and then use a consultant as well to help them, to train them, say, okay, these are the policies, come up with the policies, come up with the process of doing the customer due diligence, and then when they need to report things, come up with the risk-based approach that you've chosen to go with. So you create the client profiles. You're going to decide, okay, customers with these kind of profiles or this kind of transaction, these are going to be high risk. So then for these high risk, we have to do this. There are different ways to go about doing it.
How about our training?
Our
Like,
training, yeah, you can take our training. Now, it's only 3 hours, so it's not going to make you an AML expert. There is actually a certification, a global one, but that takes 3 months. So again, a 3-hour training is not going to make you an expert, but at least it will give you an idea of the things that you need to look at to come up with your AML policies.
mm-hmm. We have some comments. First of all, Joyce said that this is incredible informative, so thank you.
Thank you.
There's another question from Ruben. Please tell me which AML or KYC tools do you usually use, and which one would you recommend?
So so some of the bigger ones that we were discussing earlier, the most popular, most well-known ones in the world. So there's Refinitiv that has their World Check. There's
Mm-hmm.
also Thomson Reuters and LexisNexis.
Mm-hmm.
However, those tend to be more expensive. So SMEs might not be able to afford their packages, but you can
Mm-hmm.
look into it with them and see if they've changed their practice. But as far as I know, they still are not really catering towards the small businesses. And there's Watchdog. So that was the company, correct, that we had the call with,
Yeah.
Yulia?
Yeah.
That's out of Abu Dhabi. and they
Mm-hmm.
are catering to smaller businesses as well. So there
Yeah.
are some options. There's one called Themis. It's Themis, and that seems to be more affordable as well.
Okay, good. Because yeah, it's me and Marcel, we had a call with this company, and they took us through the process. So basically, you just type the name, origin, and I think date of birth, something nationality it was, and it was screening the person like if he's in high or low risk. So I guess if it comes from the countries that are high risk straight away, it's flagged. So yeah, it can be a tool very well used. Another question. Can you discuss the potential consequences for brokerages who fail to comply with AML? Like I asked you already about this, but any real life statistics or examples that you can share? Because sometimes people are like, yeah, it's happening, yeah, it's somewhere there, but when it becomes real, when you know that XYZ real estate brokerage got fined and the broker got, I don't know, time in jail, or he's in a court now trying to get himself out.
So I went to the Ministry of Economy actually on Monday, and I met with somebody there, and I was hoping to get some fresh figures, maybe the total amount from 2023 and those types of things, but they told
Mm-hmm.
me they can't give me any new figures. But they did publish in quarter 1 of last year,
Mm-hmm.
the figures for Q1 alone was they had penalized 65.9 million dirhams worth of penalties for companies for violating AML regulations. And they
Wow.
also had suspended 50 companies for 3 months because they had failed to register with the Financial Intelligence Unit on the Go AML portal. So even doing that, if you don't even do that basic of a thing, you're going to have a penalty such as not being able to conduct business for a period of 3 months. So
Wow.
they are really going after companies for these violations. It's not just, for show or things. Sometimes you hear, oh, it's just for show. And they are really doing it. They are enforcing these AML regulations.
Well, it is fair because UAE was, I will be blunt here, but was known for a place where people will bring their money. And me with the Russian background, I know it very well, because I was real estate broker in 2000, started from 2013. So at that time we were closing deal with cash, with bags of cash. So I know it was happening, and I know the appetite and the desire of UAE governments to stay away from it, to clean themselves and to make this country not like, the black hole of the money where they go and nobody knows about them. They want to be, on the safe side, and the investors to feel safe to invest in this country. So I guess, yes, it's... and I heard also news, I heard from people that it is been kind of a topic. So there is another question. Thank you for the great information. Do we need to report and run checks when clients buy off-plan units through an agency, but directly from the developer?
So whenever you're dealing with a client who is doing a purchase or a sale of a property, then you are obligated to do the customer due diligence, and also to report if anything is over 55,000 in cash or use of cryptocurrency. So yes, the developers, they are not obligated under the AML regulations yet. It's only the brokers. But a lot of them do have their own AML policies, and a lot of them, remember, are publicly listed companies, so they have to go and do these as well. But yes, you as the brokerage should be running these sanction screenings, the customer due diligence, and then reporting as necessary.
Now it's gossip. Isn't it that Damak and Aziz are selling properties on crypto?
It's not really gossip. I mean, there are developers that are taking it. But
Yeah,
again, But again, if you are the brokerage dealing with it, then you have the duty to report that.
Okay,
So,
so developers
so
don't have to, but yeah, because you're a registered broker with a developer on this deal. So if there will be any issues, you'll be questioned and not the developer.
yeah, so here's the thing, because if the developer or any other parties, so let's say, for example, there are several parties involved in a deal. Let's say a law firm, because lawyers are also required to report these types of things,
Mm-hmm.
and a brokerage. And let's say now that the law firm reports that there was an issue when they did their CDD, their customer due diligence.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's going to happen is that the FIU and the Ministry of Economy are going to say, okay, so the law firm reported this, but what happened to the brokerage? We don't see a report from them for this same transaction. So
Okay.
guess what? They didn't do their duty. Now you're in trouble.
Okay. So
So anybody who has a reporting obligation
they
has
have
to report, yes,
This is very
regardless of
important.
whether or not somebody else did it. Now, and another point is that this obligation for reporting and for these AML obligations only are for those companies that have the activity on their license of purchasing and sale of real estate.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just a leasing activity, if you're just a property management activity, a valuer, anything else related to real estate, but not the purchase and sale of real estate, then you don't currently, anyway, have this obligation.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have that activity on your license and you're only doing, let's say, property management or only doing leasing, and you're not using that activity, then you're still obligated to do the reporting. So what the ministry was telling me was, tell the brokers, if you're not using that activity, remove it off of your license so that you no longer have this obligation to do
So
the
let's
customer.
say I'm a broker that I'm leasing properties on the palm that are way above 55,000 a year, and in our license we have like a company has a sale. So if I'm taking a lease which is 100 and let's say 200,000 and I'm taking it cash, I have to report it even if it's leasing. Okay, well this is very important.
Yes. So it's very important to know that. And Bashar is asking, I see here, so only if cash is above 55,000 or crypto is involved. So that's for the real estate activity report, but you have other obligations to report any suspicious activities, suspicious transactions, etc. Or if you're doing your sanction screening and there's a match or a partial match to a name on the list, then you've also got to report that as well. So there are still other reporting obligations.
Wow. Okay. The last question, I think we already talked a lot and you gave a lot of information, but I want to ask about technology a little bit. How can technology assist in meeting AML compliances within real estate sector?
Yeah, so there's a lot of technology these days that can help with all sorts of things. So with the screening, as we discussed earlier, the different kind of sanction screening software, you also have those that can help you with your customer due diligence and your record keeping, because you do have to keep records for at least 5 years. So that's records of the client's information, so all their IDs and all of those things that you've collected, and also the transaction itself. So you've got to hold on to those things, and you're going to need some kind of technology, because you also have to be concerned about data protection, because we do have those laws in UAE as well. So all sorts of all sorts of technology that you should be using at this point. Obviously, AI and blockchain are up and coming, so I'm sure in the future, and not too far future actually, that we'll be using those as well with AML.
Okay, yeah, so it makes sense. I guess it's, well, at this point, it's usually a CRM system, right, that has all the customers and their documents. So that's one type of software, and another one is the screening. Just my question, can be a receptionist the one who makes this reports to the government, like about AML?
It can be. I mean, if this receptionist is not, again, customer facing in terms of trying to get deals done and those types of things, then yes, it could be somebody. She or he could be trained by a consultant to learn what to do and what to look for, how to do the registration on the GoAML portal and things like that. So yes.
Okay. So in theory, like if you don't have big budgets, you just need to get trained a person and register in the system, which is also very, very important. And it's like a form, yeah? Like they log in and you have to register like a form, yeah?
Yes. And you have to make sure that the registration in the GoAML portal is updated, because if that compliance officer ends up leaving the company or you change the compliance officer, et cetera, and the details are not updated, it's just like you haven't registered at all. So you're going to have penalties if you don't keep updated. Because why? Because the ministry and the FIU communicate with that person that's registered on the GoAML portal. They're the ones receiving the circulars, any updates, etc. So if this information isn't updated, it's going to be a big problem.
Wow. Okay, that's very interesting. You know, I thought I'm updated, but apparently I'm not. I got a lot of information. Thank you very much. But I want to say a little bit about our course. I just sent a link to our course because if you guys are interested and if you feel like there is a gap that you want to fill, you know, this information about AML, and you have the possibility to get a course, there is a registration link. It is not expensive. It is 400 dirhams, and it will be offline where you can ask questions, where we'll have a representative from the Abu Dhabi government as well. So like we really want to support and inform real estate brokers about this issue. And Majdal is a guru of real estate law. Like honestly, like if I have any issues, like I'm just Majdal, what is the right answer? Majdal knows it all. So yeah, if you don't follow her on LinkedIn, obviously follow and come on our training, and I'm sure you're gonna enjoy it. We don't have any more questions, so we can just go and have a tea now.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for today.
Thank you very much. It was very informative. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite. Take care.
Bye.